The rest of the speakers, then I'm going to introduce you to my new boss. I would give you the history of it, but I know you all are very newsworthy, so you know over the past week or two we have a new prosecutor that was elected. Ryan Mears has been in our office for 12 years as a deputy prosecutor. In that time he left for a short period to also get some experience in private practice. He's been in just about every division, including our division of the Narcotics and Gun Division. Has taken about, I don't know, many hundreds of criminal cases to the final disposition and has done well over 100 criminal trials as well, and he is awesome in trial. And he's now our new elected prosecutor until 2022. Welcome, Mr. Ryan Mears.
Thank you. I wanted to introduce our speakers here tonight. Our first speaker, we're very proud to have. He's also with the Marion County Prosecutor's Office, Andy Emhart. Andy is the Assistant Supervisor in the Narcotics Division of the Marion County Prosecutor's Office. He's been with the office for over 5 years and is currently the dedicated prosecutor to multiple law enforcement agencies, including the FBI IMPD Safe Streets Task Force. In addition to his regular caseload, Andrew is also the assigned prosecutor on all matters filed under the red flag, or what is commonly referred to as the Jake Laird Law, from 2016 to 2019. Andrew conducts regular training with younger attorneys in the Narcotics Division and is as well as seasoned police officers. Andrew lives in the Broad Ripple area with his wife and small child. Give it up for Andy Emhart. We are also fortunate to have with us today Peter Coe. He is a 31-year veteran officer of the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department who's assigned full-time to the SWAT team's Quick Reaction Force. Officer Coe was among the responding officers lured into an ambush in August of 2004 to a neighborhood being peppered with gunfire. Getting wounded himself, he returned fire and fatally striking the suspect. At this scene, the suspect took the life of IMPD Officer Timothy Jake Laird. Officer Coe holds a national certification from the National Tactical Officers Association. We're very pleased to have with us today Officer Coe. And our final speaker today, starting at point guard out of Butler University, via the United States Army, Indiana University Law School. He is your undefeated, undisputed, 3-time prosecutor here in Marion County. Give it up for the Honorable Terry Curry. And with that, we will begin the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Mears. If you remember last year, we did a similar type presentation on gun violence, and Terry actually did the entire presentation and talked a lot about sensible gun regulations and gun violence and gun laws. We will answer some questions on that if need be as it goes to the end. But today's session is different. Today's session has to do with a civil process where we can remove guns from those who might be in distress or having mental illness problems. And it came about because of a bad situation, a horrible situation that happened back in the fall of 2004. It was an August evening, about 2 in the morning, when police officers got a call. And I will tell you that as we start the presentation, we're going to kind of tell you how that law came about, what Officer Coe went through that evening. Terry will talk a little bit about then things that happened before that date even happened that should not have happened. There's some radio traffic we're going to play. If you find that in any way distressing or you may not want to listen to, it is a little bit graphic. Feel free to step out in the hallway until that's over.
Charles 429, Charles 322, a person with a gun, 2745 Deep Street, will be the residence across the street from this address. The white male heavy set shooting a machine gun behind the residence. Joel, I do have a man with a gun. I've got several people pointing in those directions. You got a automatic, yep. A couple more units to start for 2700 D. Attention on car 335 advising he's been shot, 2700 D, 335. Attention on car 335 advising he's been shot, 2740 shots being fired. 480 at 159. More units to start for 2700 D, 335. 335, where are you? Run control. A big shot. Don't go down that street. Nobody go down the street. He fired several shots at me in my car. I've been hit. control to 335.
Control. Across the alley, second house south. Timber. I'm being shot at right now.
35, are you in the 2700 block or are you at Gimber and Beats?
Timber. There's a semi. 2 houses south of my location. That's where he's at. He's firing at me now.
335 is advising he's also being shot at. The subject is 2 houses south of Gimber and Beats. Gimber and Beats.
His window shot out.
All units stand by. 335 a description.
Take control. I'm at the southwest corner of Gimber and Beats. He's 2 houses south of me in the garage. There's a Star semi-tractor trailer, and he's supposedly in the garage there. I have a neighbor giving me information right now. Can we turn around here so I don't walk up and get shot? We've got some more shots being fired.
Attention all cars, K982 advising more shots fired. Units use caution area. At this time, we only know one subject possible.
Here's the back towards us down here, 2800 block of deep.
More units for 2800 deeps. Additional shots being fired, possibly armed with an AK-47.
Control, if you haven't already, put out a SWAT page. 401 control.
We're clear on the SWAT page at 401.
Also down, second also down. Control, can we get the medic through? Is it possible? I've got the medic with me. It's State and Nelson. We got a second officer down.
64, can you advise who it is?
421 is down. We need a medic here.
64, where is 421?
421 is the 28. Just went along the White House back here.
Units stand by. 64, where is 421 for the medics?
2800 deep. We got an officer down.
2800 deep. 326, your traffic.
421 in my car. We're at Troy. I need a medic immediately.
We've got another medic for Troy and Deep. Is this for 421?
421. We've got him out of the danger zone. We need him at the scene now.
Okay, we have a medic en route to Troy and Deep for 421. Have we got a medic?
Control.
64.
At the top, sir, quit circling and line up 2714. 321 control and right at 10 320. 30. Everybody stop talking. The suspect is down. He is 10-0. Set the perimeter. Troy, Timber, 2 streets west, 2 streets east. 351 to State and Troy. I'm talking. Get the emergency personnel to the head officers. I am hit, but it's only a leg wound, no problem.
It's a lot of stuff to listen to, isn't it? This is condensed down from about 12 minutes and 30 seconds. Actually, it's longer than that, but the actual action, 12 minutes and 30 seconds, and it's all like that. It's mayhem. On August 18, 2004, at about 1:50, I was on the 3rd floor of police headquarters getting the data laptop upgraded. And I heard what you heard at the beginning, and that was Officer Conley crying for help. And he's a guy I've worked with for 10 or 15 years. At the time, I had 17 years on the department, 5 years on SWAT. And back then, we had 2 part-time jobs. So in other words, I was a Charles Sector late shift officer, and I was on the SWAT team. About 5 years on the SWAT team, and then I heard what you heard. And I knew I had to get there. I was 4.3 miles away from where they were. And you hear another fella on there, he's now Sergeant Ty Van Wagner, a fella I knew, and he worked that area. So everything I did was based on what he was telling me. I put a lot of trust in what he told me. So my job tonight is to just give you a chronology and how this dovetails into what the prosecutor is going to present to you. Because what's unique about this, in 2004, this type of engagement was an oddity. In other words, a mentally ill individual armed with military-grade weapons. You know, most police Shootings are done less than 10 yards, 3 to 5 shots in 3 to 5 seconds. But that was the traditional kind of criminal police encounter with firearms. This presented a new kind of animal. This was more like a military campaign, Somalia, Mogadishu style, and a very dedicated, mentally ill subject. Okay, so I jump in my car. I get there as fast as I possibly can. And in that time, I heard that they edited the radio traffic for you to hear certain things. If you guys were paying attention, you heard there was just a spot where someone asked about a perimeter. He didn't want to walk up and get shot. That was Jake Blair. And that happened just prior to him arriving. Hey, do you want to put that previous slide up? Yeah, the previous one. Back to, okay. Everyone heard them talking about a Star Tractor trailer? This picture is 2704 Dietz. This is Ruth Anderson's home, where Kenneth had went earlier in the evening armed with an SKS rifle and a .357 Magnum, and he murdered his mother inside that house. He then summoned both his brothers to the scene to kind of present them. He had the whole kind of body snatchers thing, like, this is not our mom. And the reason he had that attitude was because previously Mom had been instrumental in his guns being taken away from him. And at the time, what we didn't know was that she was trying to do that again on her own. She was hiding some guns in her house. So the brothers go there. He takes some pot shots at the brothers after he presents Mom that he murdered. They run out. What do you think's going to happen? Of course. The run came out, man walking down the street with a machine gun. That's where Tim Conley responded to. He responded to from Sarah Shank Golf Course down the street. You heard him talking to a neighbor. That was the neighbor saying, yeah, there's this guy down the street and he's got a machine gun. And then he's ambushed, okay? So I'm trying to get there. It takes me about 12 minutes to get there. You heard all the other things that I heard, that another officer goes down. You know, so here I am thinking the worst case scenario. Then I'm hearing Sergeant, he's now Sergeant Fagan, he was a canine handler. You could hear the dogs barking. He had 3 ambulances corralled near him at State and Nelson, but they couldn't do anything because the gunshots were still going off. So we're talking about sustained fire. We're not talking about a couple shots here, a couple shots there. The best, most accurate estimation of how many rounds he fired was after this was all said and done, it wasn't on the shell casings homicide recovered, it was how many empty 33 round clips were found. 5. So that's a lot of bullets. So I get to where Fagan is. I'm presented with this scene. I have ambulances. I can hear the SKS rifle going off. And I've seen some guys in here with Marine hats on and stuff. When you've heard Soviet era military weaponry, you never forget that noise. And I could hear it, and so I'm presented with, what am I going to do? Well, based on what Ty Van Wagner had told me, I'm going to find him. How am I going to find him? And that's where I had to make a decision. Nothing can be done to help those that are hit until the violence has stopped. Active murder. So what I did was I drew fire by putting myself where I thought this guy was. And sure enough, he did. He ambushed me. I got hit in the head. I got hit through the knee. I got hit, turned into him. Old military near ambush tactics seasoned with SWAT operator incision. Because we on the SWAT team train with heavy weapons. But unlike our foes, we have responsibility. First, we do no harm. We're responsible for everything we do. And just because he's shooting at me doesn't entitle me to just spray and pray. Because, ooh, I'm in danger. No. The SWAT team has to react a certain way. And I hope that I lived up to what they trained me to do. So I turn into Anderson and I take him down. I take him down with a combination of my M4 rifle and my handgun. I take him down right across the street from his house at 2 in the morning in the pitch black. Now you tell me, I didn't know where he lived. I didn't know who he was. Was it coincidence? Because in that house was an arsenal. There was an arsenal that the prosecutor is going to talk to you about. And then you're going to see in our system, sometimes we face certain things and it's very frustrating, but he's going to get into the law and I'm not going to take his thunder away. But so I was just here to give you that chronology. So now you have all the stuff that has you on the edge of your seat, the tragedy. You know, Jake Laird was murdered in the prime of his life. He had a daughter at the time. You know, he's someone's brother, he's someone's father, he's someone's son. And we had a mentally ill, a bona fide diagnosed paranoid schizophrenic with military-grade Soviet Warsaw Pact weaponry. Because his favorite thing in life, and this was confirmed, was the Indiana State Gun Show. And at the time in 2004, he was also an avid fan of these computer games that almost train you, because based on what you do, it either makes foes appear or not. So if you shoot and you move your position, guess what? The computer doesn't. Because people ask, did Anderson have training? Because he was firing, and then he would move. Nobody ever saw. He would ambush us. That's what we're faced with. Out of this terrible tragedy came this law, which gives them new tools. So thank you for your attention, and I will pass the mic off. to Prosecutor.
Turns out that the events that Officer Codis described was not the first time officers had been to the 2700 block of South Dietz. January 20th, 2004, a few months before the events of August, Officers Eric Strange and Aaron Sullivan had responded to a call in the 2700 block of South Dietz, call to assist paramedics with a combative patient. That patient was Kenneth Anderson. Kenneth Anderson was taken to St. Francis Hospital for what's called an immediate detention. If officers have the ability to assess that someone is clearly suffering from a mental disease issue, they have the ability to take someone to the hospital, and then there's a process by which a court can determine whether, in fact, this person should be held for evaluation and perhaps treatment. On that day, Kenneth Anderson was, as I said, taken to St. Francis Hospital. On the same day, Mr. Anderson's mother gave the officers a key to Anderson's house. And there, the officers found an entire arsenal of weapons. Keep in mind, this is back in January 2004. They seized 9 firearms and over 200 rounds of ammunition. The firearms seized that day included a fully loaded SKS semi-automatic rifle, 2 banana clips, extended magazine clips, as well as the other firearms. Kenneth Anderson was released from his mental health detention a couple of months later. On March 4, he demanded a return of the weapons. These include some of the weapons that were returned to Kenneth Anderson at that time, because the police agency, the prosecutor's office, we had no basis by which we could retain the weapons. Kenneth Anderson had not been charged with a crime of any sort. He had merely been admitted for an immediate detention and treatment for his schizophrenic condition. In what is a horribly, horribly chilling email that was sent at the time from Officer Strange to Jill Klaus about the gun release, Officer Strange, who had been on that first run and had seen the arsenal that Kenneth Anderson said had seen officer said in his email, "That's bad news. Could you tell me what judge that was? I have a feeling this guy will be a suspect in a homicide very soon. Plus, this guy is anti-police and paranoid. The FBI is out to kill him and his family. I just hope I don't get dispatched to his house. He has enough firepower to give our SWAT team a long fight." And of course, as you now know, on August 18, Anderson had some of those weapons in his possession, including the SKF semi-automatic rifle that he used to engage Jake Laird, Officer Coe, and the other officers on that day. It's fair to say that Mike and Debbie Laird, Jake Laird's parents, were determined that Jake would not have died in vain. And they were determined that his legacy would live on in various ways. First of all, they started the Jake Laird Memorial Fund. And over the years, that fund has raised now almost $1 million that goes to public safety agencies to fill various needs. They have an annual golf outing each year in August. And to show the respect that the public has for Jake Laird's sacrifice, and Mike and Debbie, it is an unbelievable outing. I've never seen anything like it, the outpouring of support. And as I said, they've raised over $1 million to fund public safety agencies. And in addition, obviously why we're here tonight is to talk about the Jake Laird Law. And in 2005, in the very next legislative session, after the murder of Jake Laird, the law was introduced in the Indiana legislature, and it passed in the Indiana House by a vote of 91-0. It passed in the Senate by a vote of 48-1. And Andy's going to be talking about that bill, what it provides, and how we utilize that bill. But I'm going to go off script for a minute and talk about something we talked about last year and how I believe it is part and parcel of what we're talking about here today. And that is what I just mentioned in terms of the aftermath and the passage of the bill. This is the actual SKS rifle that was used by Mr. Anderson to murder Jake Laird. How many of you were here last year when we talked about sensible gun regulation? I know we have so many repeats. Anyone remember this? This is an AK-47 that was used to murder Officer Perry Wren by Major Davis. At the time Jake Laird was murdered, of course, the police had no ability to seize and keep the SKS rifle we've just seen. If you recall from last year, this AK-47 was used by Major Davis to murder Officer Perry Wren. Major Davis was walking around at a neighborhood cookout carrying this weapon with a modified grip like a handgun. And as you recall, we discussed at the time that because Major Davis' prior criminal history only consisted of a prior misdemeanor conviction, there was nothing under Indiana law that prevented Major Davis from walking around the streets of Indianapolis with this weapon. This is an AR, I believe it's, maybe Officer Coe knows, I believe this actually qualifies as a pistol because of the short barrel, but it is an AR style weapon, semi-automatic weapon. Darren Banks was just convicted a couple of weeks ago of firing multiple shots into a home, killing 1-year-old Malaysia Robeson. Again, because Darren Banks had a minimal criminal history and no felony that would have precluded him from having this weapon, he was free to drive around the streets of Indianapolis with this weapon in his car. Make no mistake, we are pleased that we have the Jake Laird law to use as a weapon in taking some of these firearms off the street. Would our legislature even thought about passing the red flag law if Jake Laird had not been a police officer. Our legislature needs the will to address the ability that these sort of weapons can be carried in public streets in Marion County. And it continues to be our mission to push our legislature to adopt sensible gun regulation and simply do the right thing. This I'll pass to Andy, who will tell you about the nuts and bolts of the Jake Laird law.
Thank you, Terry, and thank you, Officer Coe, for everything you've done. My name's Andrew Rimhart. I, over the past few years, have been the assigned prosecutor to handle the cases that have been filed under the Jake Laird law. Since about 2005 to today, around now, there's been about 600 filings in total of cases under this law. So I want to kind of go into the weeds and talk about what this law means, what it entails, and then I'm going to step us back and talk about some national perspectives and what's going on in the national conversation with laws, with red flag laws, just like this. So in a nutshell, the state must show that the individual is dangerous and in possession of a firearm. If the state can meet these elements, the court will order the retention of a firearm for at least 180 days. Now, obviously, it hinges on this concept of what does dangerous mean. First, if an individual presents an imminent risk of personal injury to the individual or another individual, or it is probable that the individual will present a risk of personal injury to the individual or another, and that individual has a mental illness that is not being controlled, or there's documented evidence that gives rise to a reasonable belief of propensity for violence or suicidal conduct. So looking at this, there are basically three scenarios that typically arise. First, under the imminent risk section, these are where the police are arriving to a scene where tensions are high. A lot of times in these filings, what we see are incidents that begin as domestic disputes, but don't rise to actual physical violence. One side of that dispute in these filings will typically go take a firearm and threaten to commit suicide. The spouse will then call 911 and police arrive. Without this law, without there being a crime or anyone being able to be separated out, the officers wouldn't be able to react appropriately and control the situation. But with this red flag law, officers can confiscate that firearm and cool the situation down. And that's essentially what this is for. The second scenario is the probability of risk of harm and an uncontrolled mental illness. In these scenarios, what we see are episodes of psychosis. A lot of times an individual will call the police on him or herself for fear of hallucinations coming true or paranoia coming true. And when they're armed with a firearm, who knows what can happen. So that's how those situations arise. And the third, the larger situation, are where there is a probability of risk of harm, but then on top of that, documented evidence giving reasonable belief that the individual has a propensity for violence or suicidal conduct. Now, as you heard, obviously, about the Kenneth Anderson situation, his situation would fit under all three. But come, after January, there was documented evidence giving rise to his propensity for violence. So there are two paths for seizure that law enforcement can take. First is a warrant. They can present and package up all the information up front and ask a judge permission to search an individual's home and seize any firearms. The second route, and this is very important and unique to Indiana's law, is that Jake Laird law also allows for warrantless seizure. Now, obviously, the police have to be lawfully present, but where they feel that an individual is dangerous and in possession of a firearm, they can take the appropriate action and remove that firearm from the situation. So after all of that happens, this is kind of really into the weeds as to the process, but the state needs to show by clear and convincing evidence of the elements. If the state is able to prove it, then the gun will be retained for at least 180 days and the judge will enter a dangerous finding. If obviously we cannot prove it, then the firearms are immediately returned to the respondent. After that 180-day retention period, the respondent, the individual, can ask for their guns back. If they show that they are no longer dangerous by preponderance of the evidence, essentially 50 plus 1%, then they can receive their firearms back. If they fail to meet that, the cycle continues. After a certain amount of time, it comes back to the state that we have to show by clear and convincing evidence that they are still dangerous. So you might ask, what happens with a dangerous finding? Well, as mentioned, this law has been updated as of July 1st, 2019, and the consequences of the law are some of the major updates that were made. Originally, the individual's firearm license would be suspended for 180 days or however long that period lasted, and that was it. That was the only consequence. Meaning that even with the dangerous finding, technically someone could go out and purchase another firearm. Now with a dangerous finding, that stays intact. However, the respondent is prohibited from possessing a firearm. A violation would be Class A misdemeanor. They're also referred for further treatment, and their name is submitted to a background check system called NICS. Therefore, they wouldn't be able to purchase a firearm with that dangerous finding on them. So that's the general broad overview. One thing that can happen, though, is if an individual does not show up to their hearing, or they do not challenge to get their firearms back, technically, they can go purchase more guns. That under this law, the law applies to that gun, that night, and that person. And it doesn't go any farther beyond that. That is one thing that we are battling with on this law. So I'd like to now talk about the national overview of kind of how we got here and where the climate is right now. So the first state to develop a red flag law was Connecticut. If you recall, back in 1999, there was a mass shooting at the state lottery office. A disgruntled employee killed multiple of his supervisors. In response, Connecticut created their law that requires a warrant prior to seizure, that everything had to be presented to a judge up front. Our language kind of mirrors that, probable cause to believe that a person poses a risk of imminent personal injury to himself or herself or to others. Then fast forward to 2014. So until 2014, Connecticut and Indiana were the only two states with a red flag law. In 2014, California developed theirs, which effectively, as we'll talk about some other states, has become the national model, I guess if you will. That theirs is formally called a temporary emergency gun violence restraining order. It again, like Connecticut's, requires a warrant up front. But what it adds is that the individual must surrender all firearms and they are prohibited from possessing any additional firearms. 2016 and 2017, Washington developed theirs and called theirs an extreme risk protective order. So if you ever do any further research on this topic, you might see the acronym ERPO. And that's basically where this language came from, out of Washington and Oregon's approach to this issue. It's essentially the same as California's model, but it adds that a family member can file that petition. It does not have to be a law enforcement officer requesting someone to give up their guns. That's where things were until Parkland, Florida. 17 people were killed in a mass shooting on February 14, 2018. Victims included 14 students, football coach, athletic director, and the geography teacher. The shooter was a former student, Nicholas Cruz. And I understand this is a very wordy slide, but the wordiness of this slide brings home the point that up to the point where Nicholas Cruz committed these heinous acts, people were aware that there was a significant danger that he posed. I'll take you down to the very last bullet point. The FBI, by what they said and what they informed the public, heard that a person close to Cruz called the public tip line and left information on gun ownership, desire to kill people, erratic behavior, disturbing social media posts, and the potential of being a school shooter. Bring us back to our definition of what it means to be a dangerous person, where it is probable that the individual will present a risk of personal injury to the individual or another in the future, and there is documented evidence causing a reasonable belief that the individual has propensity for violence or suicidal conduct. If Florida had a red flag law, or if they had a law like ours, they would have been able to take action to remove the guns from Nicholas Cruz's home and prevent that mass shooting. It's that incident that has brought national attention to red flag laws, and us being one of the pioneers in creating and using these red flag laws, we now have some attention and a responsibility to explain what these are. So since Parkland, Florida, there have been obviously bills in Florida, Vermont, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, New Jersey, Delaware, Illinois, Maryland, and DC passed. I think there are actually a few more after doing some further research on this. Bills in Michigan, Ohio, Nebraska, Kentucky, and Pennsylvania have been introduced. Last year in Texas, their proposed bill failed. However, their circumstances could be a little bit different after the mass shooting in El Paso very recently. We now have federal legislation proposed. Indiana's Congresswoman Susan Brooks has presented a bill in the House to provide funding to states that adopt similar language to our law. California's Senator Dianne Feinstein has presented a bill essentially doing the same thing to have states adopt a law similar to California's. So that's where things are right now. I'm going to circle us back a little bit, that something that I've found very fascinating. There's been some research done by some local professors and researchers that have described the impact of our law on suicide rates. Now, as I mentioned at the very earliest with some of those filings about the imminent risk, those are developed out of suicide calls, essentially, and police are able to take action. Aaron Cavisto last year put together some research and showed that Indiana's suicide rate after the enactment of our red flag law is 7.5% lower than that of comparison states. What's also interesting is what the research showed in Connecticut as well, that between 1999 and 2007, there were, I don't think, really any documented uses of Connecticut's law. However, they started enforcing it after 2007, and that's when Connecticut's suicide rate went down by an additional 13.7%. So the bottom line is that Indiana's red flag law is a narrowly tailored law that balances public safety with constitutional rights, and there is no telling, and there's no way of knowing just how many lives this law has saved. I'm now going to turn it over to Teen Fellows to discuss some perspectives on gun violence. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
My name is Jake Broche. Aloysius. I'm a program coordinator at the prosecutor's office, and as program coordinator, one of my pleasures over this past summer has been getting to have our fellowship, our 2019 Youth Violence Prevention Fellowship. And so we have some of our fellows here today if they would like to join me up here. As our speaker demonstrated, it's certainly not just adults that are affected by gun violence, it's certainly our students as well. And so all of these are students in Marion County who have a personal interest in reducing violence, both of the gun kind and of other sorts. So they're here to give some takes on gun violence.
Hi. Oftentimes, the discussion of gun violence is centered around adults. But what the prosecutor's office has done is shift the face of the conversation. Personally, this demonstrates the prosecutor's office aim of getting to the root of the issue rather than making assumptions of gun violence. This stood out to me as a teen who has had many people around me encounter some type of gun violence at least once in their life. Their experiences really left them feeling unseen and unheard. The impact and certainly the causes of gun violence go way beyond what we can see. But what I took away from my time at the prosecutor's office is how many resources are offered, especially for juveniles, so that violence will be the last resort. No one wants to see gun violence, and certainly no one wants to put that many people in jail. This, we, and all of us, are the start of fighting the issue of gun violence head on.
When there's more people who want and want safety for everyone in the community, we can keep less people and youth out of the justice system. There are a variety of programs that I now have knowledge of, and even individuals that help youth stay out of the system, and they receive help, assistance, knowledge, sometimes even training in emergency situations, etc. Being in this fellowship as a young person, it made me more aware of my surroundings. Doing this fellowship also fulfilled my mission of serving the community, no matter what field of profession one may have. Being a part of and serving the community is mainly the most important thing that I learned in this fellowship. I totally will recommend this fellowship to another peer of mine who is interested in law in some other way, or someone who is interested in improving their communities. I will always value this experience, and I am truly grateful for having the opportunity to speak in front of you and share my experience.
Hi, my name is Amina. I'm a senior at Ben Davis High School, and I'm a clumsy person. I drop things all the time, and I found, actually, in fact, I did this just this past week. I have a cut to prove it in case anyone's doubting me. I'm all better now, though. And I find it really helpful to relate a lot of social issues to this habit of clumsiness of mine. The thing is that when you drop something, it tends to break into a lot of pieces. Think of a glass breaking on some carpet. And you can pick up the bigger pieces, but eventually you're going to be left with those little shards that are still stuck in there. To me, violence is a phenomenon that develops through small actions. Like a mound of clay that's shaped until its final form, it's slowly molded and becomes larger and more sturdy as we build it up. Fortunately, or thus it compounds over time. But fortunately, in the same way, we can grow and develop love. Of course, to take action on the epidemic of gun violence, or any type of violence for that matter, legislation and programming, things like this event here, are all important. But at the same time, but important too is the way we live our lives. By establishing what Bell Hooks has coined as a love ethic, we can better tackle the issue of gun violence and all forms of violence in our everyday lives.
Hello everyone, my name is Nia Wilson. I'm currently a freshman at Indiana University, Bloomington. Being selected to work with the Marion County Prosecutor's Office is a privilege that has granted me the opportunity to voice my opinion on one of the most daunting issues for teens in Indianapolis, youth violence. During the duration of time I was present in the office, our opinions and thoughts were always heard. In the environment, healthy encouragement was fostered to seek out how to avert youth from negative behaviors because it is the action of peers and friends that we interact with daily that needs to be aided. It seemed to be nearly daily I would hear they are not bad people, they have just made bad choices. And from firsthand knowledge, I can attest to the disconnect teens tend to have between actions and consequences. That is why I think this experience was so important for both the youth and adults in the office. With my peers' insight on youth mindsets and the capability to enact laws and programs accordingly from the prosecutor's office, we were able to work towards real change, bridging any potential disconnect from the different consensus. I have witnessed how harmful youth violence is to the person perpetrating the crime, the victim, and third-party associates. Everyone in the community is connected. Their detrimental actions have a ripple effect on everyone. Youth are the leaders of tomorrow, which is why the cycle of violence cannot start with them. The effort being made from the Marion County Prosecutor's Office is commendable and an act I am proud to contribute to for myself and for the youth that are being raised here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, guys. And please joining me in congratulating them on being the inaugural class of the Youth Violence Prevention Fellowship. We have some certificates to hand out. So,
Thank you very much. That's our future there, folks. There are a couple other people in the room I want to just recognize just briefly, and then we'll start question and answers. Do you have a microphone for that, Mike? Or do you need one of these mics? You have some mics? Okay. You guys could just wait to raise your hands over there. Rob Beetson is a deputy prosecutor that used to prosecute the Jake Laird cases. Started it back in 2012 or 13, I think, and kind of took it to our next level. And our current deputy prosecutor that does it now, Brian Smith, is also in the back of the room as well. And I also want to recognize hiding back in this corner, Captain Chris Bailey is back here with us. Chris has not only been a leader at IMPD, but he was also a very good friend of Jake Laird's. And I'm quite certain that he's here tonight because of one, gun violence, but also as a tribute to his friend. So thank you for being here, Chris. Okay, I think we're ready for start questions. Do you guys have a microphone that I can hand off? Actually, I'll stay at the podium and you guys use this one. Okay. I'll leave the questions will be for them. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I actually do biopsychosocial assessments in emergency room, and sometimes we have to put people on emergency detentions, and if they disclose to us that they have weapons, we just write it down, we don't do anything, and sometimes people leave. So as a person that is doing these types of things with people that may be totally unbalanced, suicidal or homicidal, what should we do?
Andy?
Thank you for your question. I'd say call the police. There's a dedicated unit of gun detectives that generally handle these kind of incidents, and they won't be able to act on the information unless they know about it. Immediate detentions and those emergency detentions are a very common beginning to these. So if you could just contact the police, not emergency line or 911, to let them know what's going on and that they've disclosed that there are weapons.
And I think it would be important too to make sure you get all the information possible, because we will have to then start building a case and probably eventually get a search warrant that we'll need probable cause to get to. Chris, you have further information on it?
Yeah, each of the service districts within INPD have both a clinician and an officer dedicated to following up with those folks that have been involved in immediate detentions. So you can make that connection. I'm happy to help you do that after the meeting if you want. But each of the districts has a person, an officer and a clinician that work with those that are suffering from mental health crisis every day, specifically those who are ID'd, and then they follow up with them later to make sure that they're getting the services that they need to try to get better.
And what happens often then is they end up speaking with Andy directly or now Brian directly, and we all work together to either get a search warrant or finish out that report. So that's a good angle to come at. All right, Mike. up here too. I think he's got one here too.
My question is, why can't a law be passed? What do people need an AK-47 or those assault rifles for? I mean, to be used for in everyday life. I mean,
I'm deferring this to Terry Curry.
I didn't see who asked the question, but you're preaching to the choir. At best, obviously those are military weapons for use by the military. At best, in terms of civilian use, you could do sport shooting, go to a range and shoot. There's no ability to hunt with them, and certainly no reason, in my mind, our mind, your mind, that individuals should be allowed to carry them on the streets of Indianapolis, Fort Wayne, or anywhere else. And so we continue to knock on the door at the legislature. We don't get a very good reception there, but we're determined to keep pounding on the door for them to consider, debate, at least just give us a hearing, a public hearing on sensible gun regulation.
TC, will you hand that to Pete real quick? And I just want you just to talk briefly, because we talked about this when we prepped for this. We talk about the power of the weapon that Kenneth Anderson was using and the shot that actually killed Jake Laird.
The weapons that are involved, there's what's called a short 308. It's a 308 rifle, 7.62 short. For those of you that are in the military, the NATO 7.62, it's very, very high powered. We're talking 3,000 feet per second. When Tim Conley was hit, his ricocheted through a car, hit a steel steering wheel and broke into two parts, which slowed down to about handgun bullet speed. So you're talking about something that goes through walls, can go through cinder block. Our department has a leadership academy. They do a capstone about this event and other events in IPD history. The old area where this took place used to have telephone poles that were there that night that had holes through them. So you're talking about something that was made for military applications, used out to 300-500 yards. So, and that's the power we're talking about. Even our M4 is only 5.56 and travels about 2,600 feet per second.
And were you able, in the process, to figure out how far he was away from Jake when he was shot?
Well, the best the crime lab can recover, the shell casings where Mr. Anderson was standing predominantly in front of his mother's house. You saw the picture, you saw the tractor trailer. Jake was south of there, about 200 yards. So we're talking 200 yards away, and I mean, I don't mean to be graphic, but our SWAT team used to have a thoracic surgeon, a guy named Bjerke. So he was a heart surgeon. And he described to me the hit that Laird took. Laird was wearing soft body armor, so it was 2A at the time. Rifles cut through body armor like a hot butter through knife. In the case of Timothy, he was behind a car door, kind of doing one of these, because he's looking at something that's happening 200 yards away in pitch black, so he's not seeing anything. He was hit in the upper clavicle, and it traveled across his body. And I remember that, and I'm not going to do justice to it because I'm not a surgeon, but it went something like, it went in and out of his aorta. Okay, pulmonary aorta in, pulmonary aorta out, left atrium, left ventricle, right? He started naming all the different major blood vessels that this thing traversed across. The artery for his liver, pancreas, spleen, kidney, and literally popped out at the bottom of his hip. Unblemished, not bent. And the guys that were standing around Timothy Jake Laird said he wilted like a flower and just said, "I'm hit." And he never uttered another word. It's a critical hit. It's what we call a critical, devastating, one hit, you're out.
Yeah. He raised his hand for just a minute ago. I don't want to make this good. We'll get there, buddies. We have time. Alan.
My only question was to the gentleman that was talking about the 600 cases. Out of the 600 cases that he's went against where he's taking the arms away from people, how many of those people have, obviously they can't get something legally, but how many of those 600 have attempted to get a weapon or got a weapon and done something with it? What percentage of reoffenders are there?
I'll let Andy give you the exact numbers. What honestly, what mostly happens with these cases are the people don't show up. They never come to court. And we end up destroying their weapon at a certain point when the court says they're convinced that they're not going to show up anymore.
So does anybody follow up to see if they bought it?
10% maybe? Well, so to make sure I understand that they're allowed to buy more. So there is no follow-up to that. They're allowed to buy more. This law only deals with that particular gun on that particular day, that particular night, as Andy said it. So that's sort of the hole in the law, is they can still go buy another gun.
Yeah, that's kind of stupid.
I'm not going to comment.
So, as Rick was referring to, and we don't know the number. And the reason we don't know the number is that upon the filing of one of these cases and upon the initial judicial review, kind of the probable cause determination that we use in the criminal system, there is not the background check flag up front. So there is no tracking mechanism. There is no way to know if somebody goes and purchases a firearm after one of these cases. There have only been, I think, 4 to 6 cases that have been filed under the new code. And as you saw on the slide with the potential consequences, really the only potential consequence to a dangerous finding was a firearm license suspension. Well, a firearm license allows someone to carry a firearm outside of their home. It doesn't necessarily prevent them from purchasing a firearm. There is a case pending, and I want to be very careful to not go too far into details, but there is an individual who was in a dispute with a neighbor, and there was a firearm involved. That firearm was confiscated. Our office filed the a gun retention matter. She did not come to a hearing, and she then purchased a firearm legally, and there is an allegation that firearm was used in a pending case. So it has happened. The number, I don't know.
So if they don't even come to court, you don't even get a chance to evaluate them.
Correct.
That's correct. So that's a flaw in the law. That so we kind of look at it as it's better than nothing. And I can tell you that Mr. Curry, and I'm sure Ryan will be the same exact way, is on the forefront of the legislature door every single day of the session, trying to make that law and other similar laws better. You pick, Mike. I don't want to make people mad. I'll let Leffler make people mad.
Back to this military grade term, any conversations I've had with gun owners, when I use that term, it immediately shuts down the conversation because the lawful gun owners say that's a pejorative term, that it's not an accurate term. And so clearly you're running into some sort of situation like this with the kind of language used when you're talking to legislators. But how can some of us folks who are like ambassadors for peace or for community reduction of gun violence, how can we talk about these deadly military style weapons without using those, for lack of a better term, loaded terms? Is there another way to talk about it?
I think that's a great point. DC or Ryan, what do you guys think?
Sure, just the obvious, which is that they are semi-automatic weapons that's able to fire as quickly as you can pull the trigger. And the other part is what Officer Coe touched upon, which is the devastating effect of being shot with those weapons. There was a segment on 60 Minutes which showed how an AR shell would tumble and the effect that would have on being hit with that. So, yeah, I get your point about military grade, and that's not something that we discuss when we're at the legislature, but the idea is how close those firearms are to an automatic weapon, which is illegal, and so it's about a distinction without a difference in my mind.
Calvin
This goes back to the people not showing up for court, could you not put out like a warrant for them and for failure to appear?
So an important distinction in this law is this is a civil law, not a criminal law. This is filed as a civil case. It's heard in a criminal court, but it's more of a civil setting. So since it is a civil setting, much like if you sue someone in a car accident, you decide not to come, warrants aren't issued in those particular cases. So there are consequences if they don't show up, in that they end up defaulting and usually end up getting their gun destroyed, maybe a dangerous finding eventually, but as far as a warrant issue go, that's not part of the law. You want to expand on that?
I'll just add, so because it's not a criminal filing, because you don't have that,
Hold up, Mike.
you don't have the judges don't have the ability to issue a warrant. What we have to do is we spend a lot of time and resources trying to get certified letters out to people, and it's kind of, it feels kind of silly sometimes because we have to say, hey, we have your guns, here's the process to come and try to get them back. But that is what we need to do, because in order to ask the judge for the firearms to be destroyed in 5 years, we have to show that the individual knew where the guns were and knew what the process was. It's called service of process. So there's, in it's really the wide majority of these cases, because we are dealing with people who are fairly transient, who are in and out of their homes, who can't hold a schedule. I mean, it's just kind of the nature of what they're dealing with, that we spend a lot of time just trying to hunt these people down.
If the law works to perfection, what it's supposed to do is allow that person to go get treatment and go through various sections of treatment, whatever their issues might have been. Maybe it's mental health, or maybe it's suicidal, or maybe it's an alcohol or some type of addiction issue. Bring that documentation then to our prosecutors, show that they now are no longer that legally dangerous, as Andy talked about, and then they get their guns back. And that does happen maybe 5% of the cases, 10% of the cases. And that's how it's supposed to work. We're supposed to get people help and get them back to whole again. Back to this end. Mike's coming up behind you.
Hi. It seems to me this law depends on people identifying individuals who are dangerous. What is Indy City doing to get the word out about this law? Are they contacting local agencies, churches, school groups? What are you guys doing to get this information out to the general public?
That is a really good question, and something we've tried to do better on the last couple of years. Anytime we do a community presentation now, or anytime we do a training to our officers, because honestly we had to start with our own police officers so that they knew the law. And so we focused a lot on them in all of our different trainings. And anytime we do a community presentation now, whether it be through community prosecution or forums like this, we focus on it as much as we can. It's a tough thing though. And hopefully maybe you all can now be our eyes and ears to go out and spread the word to the different organizations that you're involved in. Because it is very reactive, unfortunately. Officers show up, there's a problem, they figure out that this law could be used, rather than being more proactive to use the law.
I have a question in that to try to get this law passed to get the automatic weapons off the streets, don't you think that you need to have the police department and people like that behind you? Because I have spoken to police officers that have said it's not the guns, it's the people behind the guns. Now, if you're going to get a law like this passed, don't you think the police ought to be behind you?
I'll defer to someone who has a better title than I have, Mr. Mears maybe, or Mr. Curry. I can tell you though, and just from my perspective, from the narcotics and gun unit, we work very closely with almost every unit in the police department, and we are all very much on the same page.
Yeah, I think most police agencies are, but it's like anything else. There is an elected prosecutor in one of the contiguous counties who every time I've ever seen the man, he has on NRA shirt, jacket, whatever. And so that's the reality, but I think nationally, in terms of national legislation, Ryan and I went to a forum about 1.5 years ago regarding federal legislation, and every major police agency, every major sheriff agency big city prosecutors all were on the same exact page as it related to gun legislation in the U.S. Congress.
Next up, Mike, somebody. We have about 10 minutes left, so we'll have some time for more questions. Great questions so
Is
far.
that a conflict of interest for somebody to be in a political position and taking a side like that? I mean, I know a lot of the politicians are taking money from the NRA, but it would seem to be, you know, visibly wise, a conflict of interest. Back in my day, we called it a good housekeeping seal when you were doing something right. Now they call it best practices, but what I hear is a lot of objections to what it is that's going on, and nobody's really put out a better policy than California or than Indiana or whatever. What are we shooting for? And then let all the states go after that, because it's really what gets the guns off the street, and nobody's really hit that mark yet.
I mean, there's not a great answer to that. That's what elections are for. If it's a conflict of interest, folks will vote them out. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, you had said, the officer stated that the shooter liked to purchase from gun shows, Indiana State gun shows. So what is it? We have so many of them here. Is it that there's no wait time? Because there's a lot of online purchasing in these gun shows, and so how do you shut that down to keep them from purchasing these weapons?
If you purchase a firearm through a federally licensed dealer, there is a background check done through the NICS system that Andy referred to. However, if you're anything other than a federally licensed dealer, there's no requirement that the background check be done. And so, as Andy indicated, one of the things that would happen now under the revision of the law in 2019, our red flag law, is that finding would get reported to NICS, so that if there were a background check done, that would pop up and perhaps disqualify that person. Something like, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe over 90% of the public believe that universal background checks should be instituted, and Congress and our Indiana legislature haven't seen fit to do that. But that is the answer, or one of the many answers to what we're talking about. Is why should someone be able to purchase a firearm, including the ones like we show here at a gun show, without a background check?
One interesting caveat to that, actually a project that Rob Beatson is doing, if someone lies on that form and it's not able to be charged at a federal level now, we're now working with the Indiana State Police closely about trying to be able to build a case against that person for lying on that federal form. Yes, ma'am. Got to hold it up real close.
Okay. As far as trying to get some reasonable laws about background checks or decreasing assault weapons, whatever, is it easier to get change nationally or at the state level?
Wow. I mean, we all see the national conversation that's going on. Obviously, it's a lot easier within 50 states to get 1/50th of people to agree maybe than it would be nationwide. Terry just mentioned that 90% of America, I think, is in favor of background checks, and that's not something new. It's been that way for 5 to 10 years, and it still hasn't passed. There's very powerful lobbyists that tend to control the national government in different ways, so I think definitely probably at a state level it's much more powerful. It would be even easier at a local level. Was usually preempted by those state laws, so I think that's why our office, and particularly Mr. Curry and now Mr. Mears, is focused on the state level very hard in getting them to come around on some sensible laws. Somebody has a mic?
Yes, this has been answered somewhat, with no penalties and no ramifications for the gun dealers that are selling these guns. How will we ever control the process?
I mean, there are no easy answers to any of these questions. There's a lot of loopholes and a lot of things that need to be closed up, and I'm not sure we ever will, as the current laws are. Those loopholes have to be closed up so that those who are not legally able to carry weapons, particularly those with dangerous felonies or mental issues, those loopholes have to be closed so that they can't buy those at gun shows where those things aren't done. So probably the answer right now is it's not going to happen until we come around a little bit. It seems like every tragedy we have, everyone is right around the front page, and then it kind of goes back to normal, doesn't it? So somehow we have to find a way to keep that on the front page. Mike?
Is the process any different for someone of legal age opposed to a minor
What process?
with the red flag law?
Good question. I'm not sure. Is the juvenile treated differently?
I don't think it applies to them. We obviously saw this in Noblesville. The red flag law does not apply to a juvenile. It is only those who are adults.
Does it statutorily say 18 or over?
I don't think it's clear, but I think that was part of the conversation with the Noblesville incident.
Okay. Rob, ever have a less than 18-year-old? Brian, no?
Usually it's covered by dangerous possession. So the juvenile wouldn't be allowed to have the gun or be a criminal offense.
Yeah, that's fair. Great point. It would then trigger the process. It wouldn't be a red flag. It wouldn't be the civil process, but it would go into juvenile court for dangerous possession of a firearm. Good call.
Yes. My question is that all these assault rifles were geared and then used in military and that type of use. How does that get into the systems to begin with? Does the military sell these or get approval like through NRA or through how does that get out there into the public to even be sold?
Well, I think the word military use is just sort of the word that was kind of describing the weapons. You can go to Don's Guns right now and buy one.
Well, that's right. One of the first things that's wrong. I mean, you should not be able to, they should, if they're military weapons or use type of military weapons, they shouldn't be for sale, period.
That's certainly the national conversation.
They should not be. And as far as heavy weights, which I'm thinking, I'm not talking politics, folks, so really, believe me. But the NRA, I think, has overstepped a lot of their different issues in trying to get what they want done, to put more money in their pockets, than it is to do the right thing. I'm saying get the military weapons off the streets, back into, if they have to burn them, to trash them if they've got too many, I don't care. But never allow them to be sold or given out into the general public. Thank you.
Wilma, remind me not to ever make you mad. Couple more questions? Hey, we got we got an unruly crowd over here. Give them a microphone.
I was wondering if any of these, nationally speaking, if any of these red flag laws have been challenged in the courts.
I'm
has
quite
the
certain
NRA filed a lawsuit or anything like that?
Yeah.
So, I don't know as far as other states. Our law has been challenged back in 2007 under a state constitutional question, Reddington versus State. Our Supreme Court said that it was an appropriately tailored law that was for a clear purpose and therefore did not violate the Constitution, and our Constitution does protect the right to bear arms. My anticipation would be that the other states and any challenge that would come from the other states their law would survive. But I don't know offhand. I'm sure though that the states, especially Connecticut and Washington and Oregon, have at least seen some kind of challenge, and they have survived because it is a very clearly focused law that is applied very narrowly.
Great question. Yes, sir.
So, whenever I've seen conversations about gun violence and restricting certain things, the topic that's always brought up is the style of gun, or just the style and the look of the guns. As we know, what we were referencing were semi-automatic rifles. There are plenty of guns that are semi-automatic, but my question is, has there ever been legislation, because talking about the caliber of the rifle or caliber of any gun that is used, because as we can see, we all know bullets do damage, but of course, bigger rounds, bigger powder cartridges, all those are different factors in it. Has there been like a tier system that has maybe been brought into legislation that is a tier system that talks about the different, like, increasing of the caliber of the rifle, or the, just the shell?
Anything that you're aware of, TC? I don't think so. I mean, I think that there's always a gun conversation of how powerful you have to get to be illegal, and how long and how big, and you know, how many times does it have to fire per second, and that kind of thing. So that's, everybody has a different range of opinions, and there's legislation offered through all that. But that probably does need to be part of the conversation as to how powerful the gun is, for sure.